Hello Star Wars fans, and welcome to episode 29 of Journey into Legends. Today we are going to be starting our read-through of the Young Jedi Knights series. Young Jedi Knights is a young adult series of 14 novels written by Kevin J. Anderson and Rebecca Moesta that follows Jacen and Jaina Solo and their Jedi classmates. In this video I will be reading and reviewing the first 6 books, which are collected in the hardcover collection titled The Rise of the Shadow Academy. I am beyond excited to begin this series. I've heard some great things about it, and coming off of finishing the dreadful Callista trilogy, this will be a big breath of fresh air. So without further ado, let's read and review. Alright, so I just finished the first book in the series, Heirs of the Force, and I had a blast with it. This book did an awesome job of introducing the series and its characters. Jacen and Jaina are both great and feel consistent with their portrayals in the various adult novels we've read thus far, such as The Crystal Star and the Corellian trilogy. We meet some fantastic new characters in this book as well. First, we have Tenel Ka, the daughter of Teneniel Zhou and Prince Isolder, 2 characters from the courtship of Princess Leia. Tenel Ka's humorless nature made her an excellent foil to Jacen, who's always cracking jokes that are either hilarious or hilariously unfunny. We also have Lobaka, the Force-sensitive nephew of Chewbacca. I really enjoyed Lobaka's character, as I've always had an affinity for Wookiees, and specifically Wookiee Jedi. The last character I wanted to talk about in this book was good old Luke Skywalker, whose portrayal in this book was fantastic. As a Jedi Master, he's extremely calm and forgiving, but also extremely powerful, a characterization summed up in possibly my favorite quote from the entire book. He carried calm power in his lean form, a thunderstorm bottled up in a diamond-hard gentleness. And possibly my favorite scene from the entire book involves the Jedi students having a massive food fight in the Academy mess hall when Luke enters and uses the Force to freeze every piece of food and every drop of beverage in midair. Moving away from the characters, let's talk about the plot, which was super fun and simplistic. It involved our main group of students, Jacen, Jaina, Tenel Ka, and Lobaka, stumbling upon a crashed TIE fighter from the Battle of Yavin, and they discover the pilot, a man named Quarrel, is still alive. Again, this plot was a lot of fun, but I had a few minor nitpicks with it. Firstly, this book takes place 23 years after the Battle of Yavin, meaning this pilot Quarrel was somehow able to survive that long in the jungle. I would have preferred if Quarrel's crash happened during the assault on the Jedi Praxium from Darksaber. Even though that book released a few months after this one, both were written by Kevin J. Anderson, so that would have been a fun connection. My other nitpick is that a redemption arc for Quarrel seemed inevitable, but he just leaves at the end. It felt like a missed opportunity, but because they left him alive, I'm hoping that he'll return in a later book. Overall, this was a great start to the series, and I'm really excited to continue. Now it's time to move on to Book 2, Shadow Academy. Alright, so I just finished Book 2, Shadow Academy, and I thought it was another fun one. In this book, Jacen, Jaina, and Lobaka visit Lando's Karuska Gem mining station in the gas giant Yavin's atmosphere before being kidnapped by the Empire and brought to the Shadow Academy, a space station where dark Jedi are trained. There they are trained by Brachus, a failed student of Luke's, and Tamith Kai, a member of a new sect of Night Sisters from Dathomir. Meanwhile, Luke and Tenel Ka mount a rescue mission and spend the book following the trail of the kidnappers, leading them from Borgo Prime, an asteroid converted into a spaceport, to Dathomir, with some fun callbacks to Courtship of Princess Leia, and finally, to the Shadow Academy. Once there, they rescue the children and escape back to Yavin 4. So I enjoyed this book, but a lot of what was interesting about it was merely set up for future payoff. For example, Luke and Brachus have a confrontation, but are interrupted before they can actually duel, and Quarrel, the TIE fighter pilot from the previous book, shows up again and secretly helps the kids escape by opening the bay doors for them. So his redemption arc has begun, and I'm excited to see where it goes. There's also some mentions of a secret Imperial leader that is pulling the strings. I'm interested to see where this will go and who this mysterious leader is. Overall, I had fun with this book, but for me, the storyline was a bit derivative and unimaginative. But I do really like the concept of the Shadow Academy, and I'm excited to see more of it. Let's move on to Book 3, The Lost Ones. Alright, so I just finished Book 3, The Lost Ones, and honestly, this was probably my least favorite so far, for a few reasons that I will talk about in a bit. But first, what is this book about? This book takes the twins and their Jedi friends back to Coruscant for a vacation. During this vacation, the twins spend some time with an old friend of theirs named Zek, who's basically a street urchin living in the underworld. After embarrassing himself at a diplomatic banquet, Zek gets kidnapped by the Shadow Academy and becomes a Dark Jedi, and the twins set out to rescue him. So one of the main reasons I didn't like this book as much as the first two was the character of Zek. I am not a huge fan of him so far. Him embarrassing himself at a banquet, being the catalyst for him joining the Shadow Academy, felt ridiculous and silly. The main reason, however, that I didn't like this book very much is the setting. I really enjoyed the first book, mostly because Yavin 4 is such a fun environment to play with, and one of the reasons I thought the second book was a bit weaker was because I thought the Shadow Academy was a less interesting location. As for this book, I think that Coruscant Underworld is super uninteresting in book form. It's honestly a slog to read about the kids exploring abandoned buildings and alleyways despite this book's short length. And during their exploration of the underworld, the kids learn about a gang called the Lost Ones, the origin of the book's title. But strangely, this gang is hardly featured in this book at all and is a pretty insignificant part of the story, so I'm not quite sure why they named the book after them. But of course, there were some things that I liked about this book as well. Other than Zek, who I didn't absolutely hate, I enjoyed all of the other characters. The aforementioned banquet scene was also really funny. The twist of the Shadow Academy hiding in plain sight in the Coruscant system was fairly well done, and the book had some interesting, albeit on-the-nose commentary on societal and financial classism, which is really well represented with the planet of Coruscant. One other thing I should mention is that we learn the identity of the secret leader of the Second Imperium, that being the resurrected Emperor Palpatine. Now, I'm fairly certain that it's not actually him, but I'm interested to see what exactly is going on, whether it's an impersonator or maybe a holofaker, like Planet of Twilight. Overall, this book wasn't my favorite, but luckily it was short. So now it's time to move on to Book 4, Lightsabers. Alright, so I've finished Book 4, Lightsabers, and I absolutely loved this one. Finally, the students are allowed to build their own lightsabers, which instantly made the book more interesting to read. It was super fun to see how unique each student constructed their lightsaber, Jason using the Karuska gem he found in Book 2, and Tenel using a Rancor tooth and a gem she received from Heirs. Speaking of Tenel, this was such an important book for her character. During a sparring session with their new lightsabers, Tenel's rushed and faulty lightsaber shorted out, causing Jason to accidentally cut her arm off. This led to an absolutely incredible arc as Tenel learned to accept her new handicap. This journey also helped her to accept and embrace her Hapan heritage, something she's been rejecting for a long time. This is probably my favorite of the series thus far. I absolutely loved Tenel's journey, and I really enjoyed visiting her homeworld of Heirs. Specifically, there was a fun sequence involving a dangerous seaweed field in the ocean attempting to eat the kids. Briefly featured in this book again is Zek, who earns the title of Darkest Knight of the Shadow Academy, putting him in command of the other Dark Jedi. Taking the title of Book 5 into consideration, I can only assume that we're going to see a lot more of him in the next book. So let's move on to Book 5, Darkest Knight. Alright, so I've just finished Book 5, Darkest Knight. Whereas the last book focused a lot on Tenel and her journey, this one focuses on Lobaka as he returns to Kashyyyk with his friends to support his sister Sura during an important Wookiee rite of passage. Also on Kashyyyk is the Second Imperium, led by the Darkest Knight himself, Zek, whose mission is to steal a bunch of computers from the Wookiees. As much as I enjoy Kashyyyk as a planet, I really didn't like its portrayal in this book. For some reason, this book paints the planet as an extremely important computer manufacturing hub, which doesn't fit with the planet's portrayal in other stories at all. Something I did enjoy about Kashyyyk's portrayal, however, was the extremely dangerous underworld, something that we see in games like KOTOR and Jedi Fallen Order. But other than that, I really didn't enjoy this book very much. Outside of the mixed bag that was the Kashyyyk storyline, this book also had a plotline about the Great Leader, aka the supposedly resurrected Emperor Palpatine, personally visiting Brachus at the Shadow Academy. Other than basically confirming that something suspicious is going on and that this isn't really Palpatine, this storyline was just pages wasted. But now that we've gotten through this book, we're ready to move on to the final book of the Shadow Academy arc, Book 6, Jedi Under Siege. Alright, so I just finished the final book of the Rise of the Shadow Academy arc, Jedi Under Siege, and I thought it was really good. This book was non-stop action from start to finish, which I really enjoyed. The entire thing took place on Yavin 4, which is one of my favorite locations and is a blast to read about. As a finale for this arc, this book was extremely satisfying. It had real stakes, climactic moments, character deaths, the culmination of character arcs, and overall, it felt like a worthy conclusion. This book saw the deaths of both Brachus and Tamith Kai, the two leaders of the Shadow Academy. Although I enjoyed how they were bested by Luke and Tenel Ka respectively, I was a bit disappointed that they both died from mostly unrelated explosions and crashes. I would have preferred a more personal and direct death for them both, specifically Brachus. I think him dying in his duel with Luke would have been a great end to his character, and would have provided Luke with an interesting moral dilemma. Another death in this book is the leader of the Lost Ones turned Imperial Stormtrooper Norris, who was gunned down by his own mentor Quarrel. Speaking of Quarrel, I really enjoyed his character in this whole arc. I've enjoyed his struggles with his Imperial indoctrination, and I thought it was an interesting choice for him to maintain his allegiance to the Empire at the end of the arc. But unlike Quarrel, Zek's redemption arc concludes with him turning away from the dark side, and while he's still dealing with the baggage of being a Dark Jedi, his redemption arc ended in a very satisfying way, and unlike his appearance in the previous books, I actually enjoyed his character, and I'm interested to see where he goes from here. And finally, we learn the truth about the mysterious return of Emperor Palpatine, the great leader of the Second Imperium. And as it turns out, just like I suspected, it was all a carefully crafted ruse by a group of power-hungry royal guards. Despite being extremely predictable, this plot twist was a fun way to tie up that loose end. Overall, I had a blast with this first series of books, and I'm super excited to jump into the rest. I'm going to save my scores and rankings of these books for a separate video once I finish the entire series, but for now, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and stay tuned for my next video where I'll be continuing the Young Jedi Knights series with the next 5 books. See ya.